Salute, folks. It's your boy, the insurance junkie, your fiduciary fella, the all-star advisor Alonzo Hall, your social media insurance bro, back again today to whap and tap on your head with yet another ADH Wealth Solution article. Today's article is from financialplanning.com in the Regulation and Compliance Division. The title is The Decade-Long Morgan Stanley Race Discrimination Suit Reaches a Settlement. Written by Dan Shaw, an October 7th, 2025 article. Before I continue, make sure you hit that like, drop a comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you're made aware every time I release new content. And as always, share. Lastly, to contribute to channel growth or to schedule an appointment with a licensed financial professional, the links are in the description of this video. So as we proceed to give you what you need. And ironically enough, before we continue, as you know, I'm going to give you guys these articles with my own personal take. We know back in a few years ago when they started the DEI, they hired a black woman at Morgan Stanley for the president of DEI, and within 3 months hired her. I personally know a lot of black and Latino women who were working at Morgan Stanley for over 30 years, and the treatment wasn't the best. Now, I also happen to know of some black men who were not in the back office but were on the sales end of things. And the reality is salespeople are generally above average or considered above average, and they get special treatment because they are the people who bring in the revenue. But let's continue. A decade-long discrimination suit against Morgan Stanley came to an end this week after the last plaintiff remaining in the class action complaint reached a settlement. Federal Judge Richard Sullivan, now the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, ordered the dismissal on Monday of discrimination claims brought by former Morgan Stanley broker Aisha Rada after learning that she had reached a settlement with the firm. Rada was part of a class action that at one time had included 6 other members, all of whom previously resolved their allegations against Morgan Stanley. Given that the claims of all the other plaintiffs in this action have been resolved, the clerk of court is also respectfully directed to close this case, Judge Sullivan wrote in his order Monday. The initial complaint was filed in 2015. Morgan Stanley, like many large Wall Street firms, has been the subject matter of discrimination suits over the years. Hold on, ladies and gentlemen. So, Morgan Stanley and all these other large Wall Street firms get sued all the time, not just for things like discrimination, but also things like their products and services. So currently you hear this wild lawsuit about people who are incorrectly offering the IUL. It's not the product. It's often the representative who sells the product and misrepresents features, benefits, or just misrepresents the product in total to the client. Let's continue. This particular one started in 2015 with a complaint filed in Federal District Court of Southern New York by Kathy Frazier, another former Morgan Stanley broker who contended she had been virtually forced out of the firm's Honolulu branch by its discriminatory practices. Frazier was joined in 2016 by the other 6 plaintiffs, all of them black, like Frazier. The ex-Morgan Stanley brokers, Yared Abram, O. Emmanuel Adepujo Grace, Andrew Clark, Kwesi Coleman, Jenna Pryor, and Aisha Rada, contended that they had been systematically excluded from the best performing and paying advisory teams and from receiving client referrals and books from retiring or departing advisors. Pause. So I personally know a person who retired from Morgan Stanley, and I asked that person, hey, do you know any older advisors who may be looking to, get rid of their book of business? Obviously, being black, that person was black too, and they said, well, no, all of those advisors are retiring. I was like, great, well, maybe they're looking to sell their book of business. Now, here's the issue. All of those black guys that I reached out to were very much gatekeepers. So that might be one of the issues of those people being blocked. And maybe as opposed to bringing the lawsuit, they could have formed together and formed a super team or an advisory team of black agents. Maintaining firm autonomy. Oh, okay. Hold on. Frazier was a plaintiff in 2 previous class action cases leveling racial and sex discrimination charges against the firm, Jaffe versus Morgan Stanley and August Johnson versus Morgan Stanley. In settling both, Morgan Stanley agreed to adopt a series of internal policies and procedures meant to better ensure fair treatment of its employees. Frazier contended in her complaint that none of the remedies called for in the 2 previous settlements was carried out faithfully. For instance, she said that she brought her concerns about discrimination to a diversity monitor appointed as part of the Jaffe settlement, but that no corrective action was ever taken. Frazier said in her complaint that she has lost substantial clients and earnings due to Morgan Stanley's conduct, and her career has been irreparably damaged. She and the other plaintiffs, according to the filing, lost wages and other benefits, suffered emotional distress, and other non-pecuniary losses, and her career was irreparably injured as a result of Morgan Stanley's conduct. A Morgan Stanley spokesperson declined to comment for this article. Representatives of Frazier and other plaintiffs' legal team, which included the well-known civil rights attorney Suzanne Bish from the Stoll and Friedman and Benjamin and Crump, and did not return requests for comments and run around the civil rights laws. Frazier, who went to Morgan Stanley from Merrill Lynch in 2007 and is now at J.P. Morgan Securities, also accused Morgan Stanley of trying to do an end run around the civil rights law, with a policy trying to bar discrimination complaints from being brought in court and through class actions. Pause. So if black people are so upset, what they could do, because J.P. Morgan is the grandfather of Henry Sturgis Morgan. J.P. Morgan of J.P. Morgan Chase, J.P. Morgan Advisors, is the grandfather of Henry Sturgis Morgan, who started Morgan Stanley. Yet these black advisors won't do things like come together, start their own RIAs, or do things like go to Ariel Investments or Harlem Capital or Equitrust. So is it that they're playing perpetual victim, or is there a real situation? It may be a little bit of both. So, trying to bar discrimination complaints from being brought in court and through class actions. In 2015, the firm sent out an email to its financial advisors about an expansion of its convenient access to resolutions for employees or care arbitration policy. According to Frazier's complaint, the messages set a deadline for opting out of a new policy requiring complaints to be taken up not in court, but before arbitration panels administered by a private group called Judicial Arbitration and Mediation Services, or JAMS. They were also barred from bringing discrimination claims as part of class action. Frazier's complaint said the consequences of failing to opt out of the new policy were never made clear in Morgan Stanley's messages to advisors. Consistent with the firm's design, the email went unnoticed by employees and understood by even fewer of those who waded through the firm's misleading disclosures, according to the complaint. Pause. I have to actually eat my words earlier because these brokers/advisors are the salespeople, and apparently they weren't getting the quote-unquote fair treatment that I said your outstanding salespeople get. Let's continue. Frazier, who declined to comment for this article, agreed on September 23rd to a dismissal of her allegations. Other plaintiffs had left the case years before. Clark, for instance, had his charges dismissed in 2020 after informing the court that he had reached a settlement. As is often the case in discrimination suits, the outcomes of the individual resolutions are almost impossible to know because they are accompanied by non-disclosure agreements forbidding participants to discuss what they agreed to. Long history of alleged discrimination. Allegations of racial, sex, and age discrimination are common in the wealth management industry. This is why the wealth management industry has that trope of male, pale, and stale. Your average financial advisor is a 60-year-old white man. Many of them are predicated on the notion that the brokerage workforce, long dominated by white men, doesn't properly mirror the diversity of the general population. A 2020 report from the research firm Cerulli found that just under 3% of all financial advisors consider themselves black or African American, and only 18% are women. So when you hear Primericans talking about their investment license, they don't have it. Census data from the same year found that 12.4% of the total U.S. population was black, and just over half was female. Separate from the class action case brought by Fraser, Morgan Stanley was sued in February by a former advisor field trainer named Berdina Moore Bonds, who alleged race, sex, and age discrimination and retaliation after she lost her job at the Wire House in 2023. Moore Bonds said she and another black trainer were the only two managers to lose their jobs amid an internal reorganization, while a white male colleague was simply transferred to another division. Morgan Stanley's industry rivals have come under similar scrutiny. Merrill was sued in November, for instance, after it adopted a policy similar to Morgan Stanley's, requiring discrimination complaints to be brought before arbitration panels. That came a little more than a year after Merrill agreed to pay nearly $20 million to settle a discrimination case brought in a class action filed by a group of black former advisors, and more than a decade after it paid $160 million to resolve similar accusations. Again, these black advisors keep going to these quote-unquote white companies as opposed to the black companies. So are we perpetual victims, or do we not know as financial professionals that there are actually black-owned money management firms out there? And in November, RBC Wealth Management was ordered by FINRA, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority arbitration panel, to pay $9.7 million over allegations of age and sex discrimination against an advisor who left 5 years before. So that's going to be it for today, ladies and gentlemen. Wipe ass. Work in progress every day and see success. And remember, folks, when people challenge you, they don't challenge you to challenge you, but they challenge you to challenge you. Accept the challenge. Salute.